to start the recording here. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our monthly workshop at the Ignite Hub. My name is Chris Stevens. I'm a career coach with a nonprofit organization called Career Catchers, and we are partnered with the Ignite Hub here at Montgomery College to bring you these workshops. So big thanks to Montgomery College for hosting this, and thank you to everyone who's here in person and on Zoom today. Today's topic will be goal setting, and we do want this to be a discussion. So if you have any questions or would like to share your experiences, if you're in person, just raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, put your question or comment in the chat, and my colleague Emma, who's on the line today, will bring it to my attention, and we'll talk about it. So once again, thanks so much. All right, so today's topic is goal setting. And we've done, a number of workshops here over the past few months about different aspects of the job search, things like resume writing and, job search strategies, right? But you can't really do any of those. You're not going to have an effective job search unless you know where you want to go, right? Unless you have a goal at the end of the line. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put together a resume and send out job applications if you're not really working towards something, right? And that something is your long-term career goal. So, the goal setting is really sort of fundamental to the job search and is really the first step in the process. So that's what we'll be talking about today. We're going to talk about sort of what is goal setting and why is it important. We're going to go over the concept of SMART goals. And then talk about sort of different strategies and tips for pursuing your goals and having them feel sort of achievable. And finally, we'll talk about some of the different skills and things that you can cultivate to sort of be more effective with setting and reaching your goals. All right, so what is goal setting? Pretty straightforward, right? It's the act of selecting a target or an objective that you wish to achieve. Right? You want something. How are you gonna get it, right? Goals are the first step towards planning for the future, right? Without goals, sort of to direct you, you're not going to know how to sort of develop your skills and leverage your experience. So that's why they're important. But there's a difference between between a goal, between sort of wanting something and actually making it a goal, right? There's a saying that what is it? A goal without a plan is just a dream, right? So what we want to do is take it sort of is take your dreams, your wishes, combine them with a plan, and then turn them into goals that you can effectively pursue. So if it helps, you can sort of imagine a visual, right? Think about a rowboat, right? The rudder on the boat is the goal, right? It controls the direction that your boat is moving. But the boat's not going to go forward without oars, right? So the oars are your plan, your process for achieving your goal, and they're what actually sort of moves you forward in that direction that you want to go. Now, you may need to shift directions and things like that, and that's fine. That's all, that's all part of the process of moving forward. But yeah, think about it sort of the oars on a rowboat. Those are your goals, and that's what helps you move forward. And it's really important to have that plan or system in place because that's how you can determine your progress towards reaching your goal. So for the sake of our discussion, I'm going to ask, either people in here or online, what's an example of a goal that you might have? It can be specific or not, but what's an example of a goal that we can use for the next part of our discussion? Anyone have any ideas? Okay. Well, we're at the Ignite Hub here today, so let's make up the goal of obtaining a career in IT, right? You want to start a career in the IT field. let's sort of use that as our example goal here. So that goal of obtain a career in the IT field, it's great. That's an excellent goal. It gives you direction, but how do you actually go about getting there, right? It's not very it's sort of vague, right? There's a lot of things that go into it, and it doesn't really give you a way to get started. It's not as easy as just going out and saying, well, I want a career in IT. Let's, and it happens, right? So how do you get started there? And that's where SMART goals come in. Some of you may have heard about these, but SMART goals are different things that you use to basically narrow down your goal and give yourself a specific plan. So SMART is an acronym, SMART. The S stands for specific. So you want your goal to be as specific as possible. What, why, where, when, and how. All of these things you need to know, to accomplish it. So let's take the example of starting a career in the IT field. Well, the IT field is pretty broad. There's many, different facets and applications. Pretty much any, industry or business or career path you can think of, has some sort of overlap with IT, right? No matter what field you're in. So it can be pretty broad. So to make it more specific, try to narrow that down. What part of the IT field do you want to focus on? For this example, let's say maybe cybersecurity. So rather than saying I want a career in the IT field, I want to pursue a career as a cybersecurity specialist, right? That's a much more focused aspect of the IT field, and it will help you, sort of guide your path, right, in terms of what education and experience you want to get. And if you want, you can even make it a little more specific, right? I want to be a cybersecurity specialist for Google or for the federal government or what have you. It's not just about what you want to do, but where do you want to do it? That kind of thing. So so you want to make it as specific as possible. M is for measurable. It's sort of one thing to have a goal, but you actually need a way to track your progress as you're heading toward the goal, right? It's very easy to say something like, oh, my goal is to, let's just say, complete some sort of IT training, right, towards my cybersecurity goal. But I don't really have a sort of a, I'll do it at some, I'll get to it at some point, right? I don't really have a way to kind of track my progress towards getting there. You can take any number of training and certifications, but if you're not sort of tracking your progress, you're not going to know how close you are to reaching your goal. You may start to feel sort of demotivated, and it's a lot easier to kind of get off track if you're not sort of seeing real progress towards your goal. Now, progress may be slow. You might have tangents and things like that. But as long as you have a way to kind of see that you are making progress, that's ultimately that's what's most important. So you want a way to be able to track progress towards your goal. So in order to enter the cybersecurity field, I need the CompTIA Network Plus certification, and then the CompTIA Security Plus certification, right? So those are two things that you can measure. I've completed certification A. Now I'm moving on to certification B. When I've completed those, that's measurable progress toward my goal. A is for achievable. So, I encourage everyone I work with to dream big, right? It's not a bad thing to set, sort of challenging and sort of big, big goals for yourself, or to have big dreams, I should say. But your goals do need to be achievable. They need to be sort of grounded in reality. And that's sort of, that's sort of managing your expectations, right? You can dream big, you can set whatever challenging goals you want, just understand the effort that it'll take to get there. A lot of times we may sort of think, oh, this should be easy, and something should be easy, and when it's not, that's when we start to risk disappointment and start to feel sort of demotivated. So they do need to be grounded in reality. For instance, if my goal was to be, to get elected president of the United States, right? Wouldn't that be great? Is that achievable? Well, maybe, nothing wrong with setting that goal for myself. But a lot of things would need to change for me to be in a position to actually achieve that goal, right? Um, not to say I couldn't do it. Anything's possible, but at this point, it's not really grounded in reality, right? I'm going to be pretty disappointed if I expect a lot of progress towards that particular goal to happen, anytime soon. So it does need to be achievable. It needs to be, something that you can kind of, you know, that you feel is achievable for you. Um, R is relevant, right? So um, sometimes when we sort of make plans and set goals and have dreams for ourselves, the most important part behind that is the motivation, right? um, you want to ask yourself as you're sort of setting these goals, is this something that you actually want to achieve? Is this something that you're passionate about and that you feel like you can commit time and effort to over the long term? Sometimes, we may be pursuing something based on external pressure from someone else, right? Family, friends, you know, workplace. It may not be something that we really want to do deep down. And, if that's the case, you can still pursue your goal, but you may not be as motivated. It may take more sort of effort on your part to get there versus something that you're actually passionate about and excited to pursue. So, make sure the goal you've set is something you actually want to achieve, and make sure it's relevant to you, right? So, if I'm pursuing, my goal is to become a cybersecurity specialist. I've identified some measurable certifications that I can take to get there, and that's achievable. Um, you know, do I then go and take um, a class in something else? Become take a real estate class. Something I'm just making something up, something like that, right? Is that relevant to what I'm trying to do? Well, maybe. Um, if you want to do it, that's fine. But sort of identifying these relevant steps allows you to sort of better focus your efforts and make sure that you're putting your effort in the right direction and keeping it focused. A lot of times we do get distracted and start sort of taking too much on, going in different directions. Um, and that can basically, cause us to sort of move off the path and take a little more time and effort than maybe it needs to, in order to reach our goal. So, make sure that your goal is relevant to you, and also make sure that the steps you're taking toward that goal are relevant, to that goal. If I'm focused on cybersecurity, I want to make sure that the training and education and things that I'm doing are cybersecurity related, right? Not to say you can't do anything else, but keep in mind what you need for that primary goal. Um, Last part of this is T for timely, right, or time bound. You want to give yourself a time frame or a deadline to accomplish your goal. Again, it's very easy to say, well, I'd like to go to the gym more and exercise, and I'll just get to that tomorrow, right? And you keep saying that to yourself over and over, and not a whole lot gets done. So having a deadline is a way to give yourself accountability. Because without that accountability, it's very easy to procrastinate and sort of not move forward. Sure, you've still got your goal, but you're not moving any closer to it. So setting a deadline for yourself is very important. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, sort of the short term, medium term, and long term goals. Um, and it doesn't really matter what your deadline is. Again, the deadline should be achievable and relevant, right? Um, but yeah, most importantly, it functions as that sense of accountability. Now, you can always change your deadline. Life happens, things happen. Everyone has their own, responsibilities and things like that. So it's okay if you change your time frame around. That's fine, but it's most important that you have one. Does that make sense? Any comments or questions on the SMART goals? All right. So we've hopefully at this point we've got our goal, right? Hopefully we've made it smart. So narrowed it down, given ourselves a time frame, things like that. Now we need to make a plan, right? We have this goal. What are the steps that we actually need to do to turn that goal into reality? And that's where making a plan comes in. So with a plan, we can prioritize and focus on our main goal and avoid distractions and things like that draw us away from that end goal. There's a study that said that shows that people are 2 to 3 times more likely to basically keep to your goals if you have a specific plan. If you have a specific plan for when, where, and how you're going to perform the behavior. So, for instance, I got a couple examples here. If you want to exercise more, you could say, before I take my shower in the morning, I'll do 10 push-ups. Right? That's very specific. It's not I will do more push-ups. It's in the mornings I will do this number of push-ups. Right? Again, there's that sense of accountability. If you're another example would be mindfulness, right? After I eat breakfast in the morning and have my coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute, right? So you're attaching numbers to these things. You're giving yourself a time frame. And so phrasing your goals like, making putting a plan into place like this, and it can be very simple, as these examples show, give you that sort of those guidelines for moving towards your goals. As we mentioned, you do want your goals to sort of be realistic and specific, and you can break down these goals into smaller steps. Again, with the becoming a cybersecurity specialist, that's a pretty big goal, right? A lot of people work very hard for that. It's not something that happens overnight. And if you sort of only focus on that long-term goal, again, it can start to feel overwhelming. So, how do we fight that? We break it down into smaller steps that are much easier to achieve. And, once you've done a bunch of those smaller steps, that all sort of comes together to bring about that larger goal. So part of your plan is to identify sort of potential obstacles, right? What's sort of standing between me and the end result of my goal? It can be anything, right? Time, money, motivation, opportunities, anything like that. And as we move towards our goals, we are going to face obstacles of one kind or another. So where possible, what we want to do is work those obstacles into our plan so that we can address them when they come up, and it doesn't derail our whole path toward our long-term goal. As we sort of mentioned with those examples, building a schedule, right, and sort of having having this plan be part of your daily routine can definitely help, right? You're setting aside time specifically to pursue this goal, to do those, to take those steps, and you don't have to think about it, right? You don't have to think about carving out extra time or giving up something else. If you build yourself a schedule, you can kind of do it without thinking and sort of create a habit, right? Using that example for the push-ups, you might be thinking about it for the first week or so, but once you do it enough, those 10 push-ups will come automatically, right? It's part of your habit now. The bottom line is just to do it, right? You have to get started somewhere. So, do it. All right. So we talked about sort of making, sort of a timeline for goals. And a lot of times when we talk about goals, larger goals are made up of smaller goals, right? And that's where we talk about sort of short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. So the long-term goal is anything that you want to accomplish, that's fairly far in the future. For our purposes on this slide, I gave an estimate of 3 to 5 years. Obviously, it can be more than that. It can be a bit less than that too, depending on your goal. But that's kind of the time frame you should be thinking, right? If you've ever been asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years, or where do you see yourself in 10 years? Your answer to that kind of question, those are your long-term goals, right? Where do you see yourself? So they can be specific, they could be a little more general. But that's kind of the time frame you're thinking of, right? Now, in order to accomplish those goals, 3, 5, 10 years out. You need to identify, those smaller steps that'll eventually get you to that longer goal, right? And that's where the short-term goals come in. And again, it varies, depending on your goal. But when we're talking about short-term, we're talking about sort of steps that can be taken pretty much right away, right? Things like, things you want to accomplish maybe in the next 6 months to a year or so. Again, it can be much shorter than that, but that's generally the type of thing you're thinking of that would be considered a short-term goal. It's going to happen sooner rather than later. So, a lot of these short-term goals will sort of combine and build on each other to get you that long-term goal. You can create medium-term goals, and that's just anywhere in between the short and long-term, right? So for our example here, maybe between 2 and 3 years, somewhere in there. But it's important that you have all these goals and write them down. Write down your long-term goal, and give yourself a time frame for it. And then under that, write down the smaller steps you're going to take that sort of build toward that larger goal. And again, when you're planning on doing that. So, if I need to get started on those IT certifications for cybersecurity, Montgomery College has fall classes, so a short-term goal might be in the next few months or so, look into enrolling in some of their workforce classes for IT, right? That would be a short-term goal. The longer-term goal might be eventually get a bachelor's degree, let's say in IT or even cybersecurity, and that would take, again, that's within that 3 to 5 year window. So, maybe start off short term with some certifications, maybe medium term, try to get some hands-on experience in the IT field. Long term, continue, get further education and get a bachelor's degree, right? You can kind of see how all of that breaks down into short, medium, and long term. Any comments or questions on that? Yeah. Oh, no. Okay. All right. So again, as you're just bottom line, as you're moving through your journey and setting your goals, you're gonna have multiple goals. And it's important to keep track of all of those. Now this one is sort of interesting. A lot of times when we think about goal setting, we do talk about motivation, right? The primary thing that's stopping us from achieving our goals is ourselves. As long as we sort of put in the time and the effort, we can accomplish our goals, and that's true. I absolutely believe in that. But there are things you can do sort of along the way that can make it harder or easier on yourself to put in that motivation and effort, right? So this is where we talk about aligning our environment. Now, what does that mean? Here's an example. Let's say that one of my goals is to spend less time on my phone, right? Scrolling through social media. It takes up a lot of time that I could be using for my, cybersecurity training. And I want to, I want to reclaim that time for myself. So what can I do to make it easier, right? Doesn't have to just be through willpower alone of not picking up my phone. So to see the example here, if I sleep with my phone next to me, near my bed, then as soon as I wake up, that's the first thing I'm going to do, right? I'm going to reach for the phone, I'm going to start scrolling, and I'm, haven't really made any progress. But if I move my phone across the room or into another room entirely, then I can't do that, right? I have to get up. I have to start, thinking about sort of how I can productively start my day. I'm removing a distraction, right? So so here we're calling that our default decisions, right? What are our habits, our routines, the things that we do almost without thinking about it, right? How do we change those to be more in line with what we're trying to accomplish? And this can be anything, right? If we're trying to perhaps follow a certain diet or something, we can align our environment by, putting appropriate foods in our fridge and trying to remove, other foods from our space entirely. things like that. And it doesn't happen overnight. It does take some effort, but this can help. Um, it's important when you're trying to do this to keep things simple and try to avoid multitasking. Um, Now, we all have to multitask to an extent, but the point is to avoid a lot of distractions, right? If we're multitasking, we're not focusing on one thing, we're distracted, and it doesn't really let us devote that time and effort as much to one thing, right? We're not quite as effective. So, keep things simple. It doesn't have to be too complex. Any sort of changes we make, have to be easy, right? If I'm going through a whole 5-step routine every morning to avoid being on my phone, that may be more effort than it's worth, right? I'm spending a lot of effort on something that you know I could make a lot easier for myself. um Try to use visual cues, right? This is where something like writing things down can be helpful. um if I need to be taking my cybersecurity course, studying my cybersecurity course, rather than scrolling social media, maybe on my laptop, I will leave a visual clue for myself, right? Put a post-it note on there that says, you know, complete IT course, right? That way, every time I open my laptop, I will see I'll see the note, and that'll make me think, okay, let's do that, and maybe not go right onto a social media site. Not that you can't take breaks; you should absolutely take breaks. But having these constant reminders do help you keep accountable, and can kind of provide you that motivation to keep going. The other thing with visual cues, it can be aspirational, right? You can have your vision boards, you can write out your goals and post them somewhere, that you'll see them every day, right? Maybe that's the first thing you see when you wake up is a list of the goals and things you want to accomplish. And that can really help with motivation, right? You kind of keep the end goal in mind, and that sort of gets you into the right mindset. Um, and again, so and I think we're going to talk about this in another slide, but there's a concept here of opting out instead of opting in, and basically um, it has to do with sort of positive versus negative, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more, but it's easier to approach something from sort of a positive perspective. So, um, to use an example, let's say I'm trying to, my goal is to eat healthier. Um, it I'm going to be more successful at sort of following that goal if I think about it, if I sort of think about it positively, right? I am making a change to my eating habits so I can be healthier and have more energy, right? The end goal of that is positive. I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to have more energy, right? That's positive, versus thinking about it in negative terms. Well, I shouldn't eat this because it's unhealthy and I feel bad about myself, right? Um, trying to sort of trying to motivate, basically the bottom line is motivating yourself with sort of the negatives is not as effective as motivating yourself with a positive outcome. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. So just something to keep in mind as we're talking about aligning our environment. Okay. So we talked about measuring our progress, and there are several strategies for doing that, right? Um, Always important to keep track so you know how close you are towards your goal. Um, Things like writing in a journal, right? When you've completed a goal or the steps you've taken toward a goal can be very helpful. It allows you to refer back to it and sort of physically see the progress you've made over time. You can keep a running tally of days in a row where you've worked on your goal. Um, Again, having that ability to see how far you've come. You're not necessarily in this alone. You can bring someone else in, right? A mentor, a friend, a family member, to be that added layer of accountability. You can have them check in on you. Hey, how are you doing towards your goal? Last week you told me you were going to do this. Have you managed to, complete that yet? And it's not meant to be sort of annoying or nagging, but it's a way to sort of be accountable and share your successes with someone else, right? Who's going to be happy for you and cheer you on. Um, and one of the sort of I would say most effective things to do is visualization, right? Visualize where you want to be, and this sort of goes with the positive and negative mindset, right? Visualize yourself having completed the goal, and think about sort of what it's going to feel like to have achieved that goal. Think about where you're going to be, and that positive mindset, right, is going to help give you the motivation to move forward, right? So, right before you go to bed or right as soon as you wake up, take a few minutes to kind of visualize, hey, what am I going to accomplish today? And how is it going to feel once I've done that? And hopefully that sort of positive, that positive mindset can help motivate you. All right. So here's I'm going to come back to this again. So making the goals positive. I really do think this is important and gets overlooked sometimes. Again, it's the difference between I want to stop eating so much junk food. Again, negative. You want to stop something versus I want to feel healthy and I'm willing to make these changes to do so. Right? You're associating a positive outcome, feeling healthy, versus a negative outcome, which is stopping eating something that you enjoy. You want to be sort of mindful of disadvantages, things like stress or sort of balancing all your goals. All of us don't just have one goal that we're working towards. We all have many goals, right? And sometimes those can come into conflict. We may feel like we don't have enough time in the day to complete everything. And that's okay. That's okay. That's time management is always a work in progress. But again, that sort of pressure can feel overwhelming, right? We can feel stressed if we're not moving towards our goal sort of fast enough and things like that. So just be mindful that those emotions and feelings are part of this process, and that's okay. The point is just sort of to acknowledge them and sort of acknowledge them, identify kind of what's causing them, and then have a plan for kind of moving past that, right? So if you feel like time management's an issue, there's strategies you can use, there's things you can change. But a lot of times when we are thinking about pursuing our goals, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves for sort of immediate results, without really kind of thinking about what it'll take to get there, right? We're not being very realistic with ourselves. I've stressed this before, but accountability is very important with the goal setting. You do have to be accountable to yourself. Again, that's why having journaling or having a checklist every day can be helpful. But I really do recommend bringing in other people, right? A mentor, a coach, friends, family, whoever, because they can help you and give you that validation that you're on the right track. So build an accountability system for yourself, whatever that may be. And again, the first step really is to show up, right? It's now is always a good time to get started on your goal, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter sort of how overwhelming it feels or how unrealistic it seems to you. There are always steps that you can take now. It may just be one small step, but that's more than you had before. So, the first step is to basically show up and decide you want to get started. Before we move on, I do want to ask, does anyone, like I mentioned, everyone here sets goals and, for ourselves, we've been doing that all our lives. Does anyone have strategies that they've used or perhaps encountered, a challenge that they could, and you're not sort of sure what strategy to use to sort of overcome that? If anyone has anything they'd like to share? Oops. Sure. Go back here.
The planning time for check-ins, like on your progress, just reflect what was my list? What have I accomplished? You know, where's their forward movement, or where's something stuck, and having a plan to overcome those.
Yes, absolutely. That's a system of, it goes back to that system of accountability. So having regular check-ins with yourself or with other people, that is a very important part to it. And again, that's where we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes. Hey, I gave myself a list of 10 items and I only got through 5. But again, that's 5 more that you didn't have when you made the list, right? So it's okay if things move a bit slower than or we challenges do come up. It's okay to encounter those challenges, um but as long as you are moving forward and checking things off the list, that's really the important part. Absolutely, thank you. All right, so skills for goal setting. So there are a few different skills that sort of we can cultivate for ourselves that will sort of make us more effective at setting and achieving our goals. I discussed motivation, but self motivation, right? And that's really the foundation of all of this. We are only going to accomplish our goals if we deep down, you know, feel that that's something we are passionate about and really want to accomplish. So we have to be able to motivate ourselves to achieve goals, and develop strategies for overcoming obstacles and sort of keeping that positive mindset even when things get tough, right? Another word for sort of the self motivation would be resilience, right? The ability to sort of keep pushing forward even if even if things get hard, or you know it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get to that end goal. So um, you know, building up those skills, and we can do that. The self motivation, the writing things down and sort of having a plan can help you sort of build that motivation, um, and can help with the resilience too. If you think about what sort of challenges you might encounter and come up with a plan to get around them, that's part of this resilient mindset, right? And it'll help you kind of stay motivated. Time management is another big one. Of course, we're juggling multiple responsibilities and things. Um, maybe even multiple goals, as we mentioned. So it's important to make sure that we're giving ourselves enough time to effectively work toward our goals. If I'm, doing my training for the IT for the cybersecurity specialist, but I can only devote half an hour to that a day, that's fine. No, if that's all I can do, that's all I can do. But at the same time, I need to realize, okay, this may not happen quite as quickly as I was hoping for, right? If I'm not, setting aside enough time. And things change. Sometimes we may have more time than others, but it's important to make sure that we're sort of in control of that and making sure that we are giving ourselves enough time, um, to devote the effort towards moving toward our goals. Flexibility. This also kind of fits in with the resilience a little bit, but again, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be obstacles that come up. Um, you know, things may change on your path, right? We talked about long-term goals, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Things are going to change in that time, and we have to adapt to those. So it's perseverance, right? It's perseverance to sustain your efforts and to carry on in the face of adversity. Um, Dealing with any problems that come up and changing your plan to account for things. But always kind of pushing forward. Self-regulation here, and here we're talking about sort of emotional self-regulation. So while it's important to kind of try to keep a positive mindset and stay motivated, that's not always going to be the case. If goals were easy, we wouldn't have to do, you wouldn't have to make a plan and sort of go through all of the stuff we're talking about to reach them. So there are a lot of negative emotions along the way. We mentioned frustration and pressure and stress. And again, it's okay to feel that way. Everyone gets frustrated. That's part of accomplishing anything difficult. But the sort of key skill here is to sort of manage that emotion and not let it sort of overwhelm you or make you quit. basically, right? That's the last thing you want to do. And things can get pretty overwhelming sometimes. It's hard. But if you can, if you can build some strategies to kind of regulate your emotions and deal with them, move past them, keep pushing forward, you're going to be that much more effective. And strategies for that again can involve journaling and talking with sharing your struggles with other people, asking them for advice, things like that, practicing mindfulness, meditation. All of these can be tools for to help us help regulate our emotions and keep pushing forward. And the last one is commitment and focus. And what that really comes down to is knowing that you're capable of attaining a goal, no matter what it is. As long as you feel that you can do it, that commitment is going to be there. That focus. So and the commitment sort of sums up a lot of this other things we've talked about. But make sure you commit enough time. Make sure you stay focused and try to avoid those any distractions that come up. And you're going to get there in the end. Comments or questions on this? All right. Okay. Well, as we wrap up here, I do want to leave you with a quote. This is from Pablo Picasso. Our goals can only be reached through a vehicle of a plan in which we must fervently believe and upon which we must vigorously act. There is no other route to success. So planning, believing in that plan and believing in your ability to do it, and then acting upon it and actually going through with it. That's how we succeed, and that's how we reach our goals. So thank you so much for coming today. If anyone has any questions or comments, now is the time. I do want to say we hope you can join us for our next workshop in July. And if you are interested in getting one-on-one career coaching services, you can sign up on the Ignite Hub website. I'm happy to meet with you and discuss your career goals and figure out a plan for how to make that happen. So you can find that on the Ignite Hub website, as well as a list of all the upcoming workshops. So hope to see you in the future, and thanks for coming.